Welcome back to Silk Warrant. Today in this story is about a girl they ignored, who came back and bought the building.
The plaque was still there, brass, slightly tarnished, mounted at eye level in the marble lobby of Hargrove Academy, right where it had always been, right where I had walked past it every single morning for 4 years, eyes down. Shoes that didn't quite fit, trying to take up as little space as possible. It read, "Dedicated to the pursuit of excellence by those who deserve it." I ran my thumb across the letters. Cold, smooth. The same smell as always, lemon polish and old money, and the particular silence of a building that has never once doubted itself. I thought, they're going to have to take that down. And I thought of the envelope, the one I had been carrying for 3 weeks, the one nobody in this building knew existed yet. That envelope is why I'm here. And if you want to understand what's inside it, you have to go back 20 years. To the morning, I walked through these same doors for the very first time, wearing a blazer 2 sizes too big, carrying a scholarship letter I had memorized front to back, and a last name that meant nothing to anyone inside. My name is not on any wall at Hargrove Academy. That was made clear to me on the first day. The admissions coordinator, a woman named Mrs. Calloway, had a way of emphasizing certain words when she spoke to scholarship students. Not mean, exactly. More like a doctor explaining a diagnosis to someone who might not follow. You will have access to the library. You will be seated with the general population at lunch. You will want to keep your financial situation private. I was 14. I nodded. I kept everything private. Hargrove ran on a currency I didn't have. Not money, or not just money. It was the way you walked into a room, the assumption that the room already belonged to you. The girls who had it were effortless in a way that read, at first, like confidence. It took me until sophomore year to understand it wasn't confidence. It was the simple, unexamined belief that the world was arranged in their favor and always would be. The girl who made sure I understood I lacked that belief was named Whitley Hargrove. Yes. That Hargrove, granddaughter of the man whose name was on the building I now ate lunch in every day. Whitley had a habit. I noticed it the first week, and I never stopped noticing it. Whenever she entered a room, she would look, briefly, automatically, at the chairs, checking, almost imperceptibly, whether the best one was available, whether her spot had been held. She never asked anyone to move. She didn't have to, people simply adjusted. She looked at me the first time on a Tuesday in September. We were in AP English. Mrs. Ferris was handing back a summer essay on the Great Gatsby, an essay I had spent 11 days writing on a library computer because we didn't own one at home. I got the only A+ in the class. Whitley got a B+, and she looked at me the way you look at something that shouldn't be where it is. A spider on a dinner plate, an error. She didn't say anything that day. She didn't have to. She had people for that. Her people were a rotating cast, girls whose names I have deliberately not memorized. Because some people don't deserve the storage space, but the one who did most of the work was a girl named Preston. Blonde, loud in the specific way that sounds like laughter until you realize it isn't. Preston had a gift for saying the thing that landed in your chest and stayed there. In the cafeteria, 3 weeks into school, is that blazer from the donation closet? It's just the sleeves are a little long. It was from the donation closet. I had hemmed it myself with a kit from the dollar store. I had thought the hem was invisible. It wasn't invisible. I put my tray down. I sat. I ate. I did not give her the reaction she was looking for. I didn't know then that the strategy I was choosing by instinct, silence, patience, precision would be the same one I'd use 20 years later in a boardroom. But it would be. What was in the blazer pocket the first day? I'll come back to that. The scholarship wasn't just money. It came with conditions. A GPA floor of 3.7. Mandatory community service hours logged and verified each semester. A mentorship with a faculty advisor, which in practice meant a quarterly meeting in which someone checked that I was grateful enough and small enough and performing both adequately. My advisor was a man named Mr. Aldridge, economics teacher. The kind of person who referenced his own alma mater, Dartmouth, always Dartmouth, in unrelated conversations. He had a poster on his wall that said, "Excellence is not given, it is earned, Mr." Aldridge sat across from me in October of freshman year and told me, in what I think he believed was a kind voice, that I should consider a more realistic post-secondary path. Something in the trades. Something local, something that matched my starting position. I thanked him. I left his office. I sat in the bathroom for 4 minutes. Then I went to the library and started building a list of every scholarship, grant, and fellowship I was eligible for after high school. The list was 37 items long by the end of the year. Let me tell you what Hargrove looked like from the outside, because you need to hold both images at once. From the street, it was perfect. Ivy on the gates, limestone facade. A kind of architectural confidence that said, everything that happens inside these walls is correct and has always been correct. Parents would slow their cars driving past it. Adults who had never been inside would mention it in conversation as a reference point for aspiration. From the inside, if you were me, it was a machine. And the machine ran on the difference between the people who owned it and the people who were permitted inside it. Every hallway, every table assignment, every small social exclusion was a gear. And the gears turned smoothly because most of us who were permitted inside understood our role was to be grateful for the permission. I was grateful. I just wasn't only grateful. The thing that changed my freshman year, that quietly, permanently rearranged something in me, wasn't Whitley. It wasn't Preston. It was a woman named Dr. Ackheffer. Dr. Ackheffer taught advanced biology. She was the only black woman on the faculty, and she had a way of looking at you when you gave a correct answer that didn't perform surprise. She just nodded, like she had expected it. Like it was already factored in. She pulled me aside after class in November. She said, "I know what you're carrying. I know you think making yourself smaller is a survival strategy. It's not. It's a delay tactic. At some point, you will need to decide to be the whole thing you are." I didn't fully understand what she meant for another 15 years, but I kept the words. I kept them the way you keep something you don't know the use for yet, but can't throw away. In my junior year, Whitley's grandfather, Edmund Hargrove, visited the school for the rededication of the East Wing. There was a ceremony, a new plaque. He gave a speech about legacy, about excellence, about the responsibility of those who have been given much. I sat in the third row from the back. I watched him speak. I watched Whitley in the front row, watching her grandfather the way a person watches something they expect to inherit, head slightly tilted, serene. Already calculating the dimensions of what would one day be hers. That was the moment I understood, really, clearly understood, what I was dealing with. It wasn't meanness. It wasn't even arrogance. It was architecture, a structure built across generations to keep certain people in and certain people serving. And the plaque was part of it. The dedication, by those who deserve it. They had decided who deserved it before I was born. What was in my blazer pocket the first day? It was a handwritten note from my mother, 3 lines. She had pressed it into my hand at the bus stop before I left. It said, "You are not a guest in any room you earn the right to enter. Hold your head up. I'll be here when you get home." I had read it 5 times on the bus. I had kept it in the left breast pocket of the hemmed blazer, against my chest, every day for 4 years. I still have it. I graduated from Hargrove with a 4.1 GPA, 3 academic awards, and a full scholarship to Georgetown. Mr. Aldridge was not at my graduation. He had retired the year before. I studied urban economics. I was interested in one specific question, the one that had been forming since I was 14 years old sitting in that marble lobby. How do buildings like Hargrove get built? Not physically. Financially, who owns the land? Who controls the debt? Who decides what the land is for? The answers were not complicated. They were just invisible to people who hadn't been standing on the wrong side of them. After Georgetown, I worked at a real estate investment firm in D.C., then moved to one in New York. I was good at it not because I was ruthless, but because I was patient. because I had learned at 14 that silence is not weakness, it's information management. You learn more when the room doesn't know what you're thinking. I want to tell you about the moment I understood the Hargrove property was available. It was a Tuesday evening. I was in my home office reviewing a quarterly report. I had a glass of water. The room was quiet except for the rain. An alert came through my portfolio tracking system, a flagged property. A familiar address. I sat very still for a long time. Edmund Hargrove had died 2 years earlier. His estate had passed to his son, Whitley's father, a man who had, by all accounts, very effectively continued the family tradition of spending money that had been accumulated by other Hargroves. The school had been struggling financially for 7 years. Enrollment was down. 3 major donors had pulled out. The board had been quietly looking for options. What was in the envelope I carried into that lobby 20 years later, that's what I'm going to tell you about. I didn't move fast. That would have been wrong. I spent 8 months doing due diligence. I brought in a partner, a woman I had worked with for 15 years, brilliant, careful, someone who understood exactly what we were doing and exactly why. I structured an acquisition offer through a holding company. Clean, legally airtight. There was a board meeting. I was not invited to that board meeting, not initially. The offer had come through the holding company, and the board had no idea who I was. The meeting where I was introduced to the board, the full board, including the remaining Hargroves, was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in October. Inside the envelope were 2 documents. The first was the acquisition agreement. The second was the development plan, a detailed proposal for what the building would become after the acquisition closed, a mixed-use affordable housing development, 48 units. Priority placement for families in the district with household incomes below 60% of area median. I had also included, as an appendix, a 1-page letter, personal, addressed to the board. It described, in clean factual language, the experience of attending Hargrove Academy on a scholarship, the cafeteria, the blazer, the meeting with Mr. Aldridge, the plaque. It was not an angry letter, it was a precise one. I arrived at the boardroom at 9:52 for a 10:00 meeting. I wore a blazer, black, well-fitted. I had bought it myself. The boardroom was on the 4th floor, overlooking the same courtyard I had eaten lunch in alone during the first semester of freshman year. I did not look at it. Not yet. There were 11 board members. 3 of them were current or former parents of Hargrove students. 2 were alumni. One was Whitley's father, a gray-haired man with the particular posture of someone who has never once had to consider whether he belonged in the room he was in. Whitley was not there. I had not expected her to be. She wasn't on the board. She had followed the path I had watched her begin calculating at 17. She had married well, sat on charity committees, and built a life from the assumption that her grandfather's name would always be the floor beneath her. The board chair introduced me, gave my credentials. Georgetown, the D.C. firm, the New York firm, the current portfolio. He summarized the offer. He said my firm's name, the holding company name, not my name, and invited me to speak. I stood. I distributed the envelopes, 1 to each board member. I said, I'd like you to read the letter on page 3 before we go through the financial terms. It's short. It will provide context for why I have a particular interest in this property. There was a silence while they read. Whitley's father was the first to look up. He looked at me the way Whitley had looked at me in AP English. The same look, error, displacement. He opened his mouth. He was going to say something. I could see him composing it, the version of dismissal that would reframe what had happened to me as a misunderstanding. A different time, you have to understand the context. I did not let him compose it. I said, very quietly, the offer is 23% above current assessed value. It's the best offer you will receive. I'd like to proceed to the financial terms. He closed his mouth, looked at the papers. The board chair said, let's proceed. The acquisition closed on a Friday in March. The board voted 8-3 in favor. Whitley's father was one of the 3. He did not shake my hand after the vote. He left the room without looking back, in the manner of a man who needs everyone to believe he is leaving by choice. I stood at the window for a moment after the room emptied. Looked at the courtyard below, the stone bench where I had sat alone, the same bench, the same courtyard, different meaning, that's how it works. Dr. Acaffer came to the closing dinner. I had found her, retired, living in Connecticut, the same clear-eyed attention she'd had years ago. When I told her what I was doing with the property, she didn't say anything immediately. She looked at me for a long time, then she said, "That's the whole thing." I knew what she meant. On the day the new development opened, 18 months after the acquisition closed, I stood in the lobby. Same marble floor, same smell of lemon polish, because I had decided to keep the floors. They were good floors, the building was good. It wasn't the building's fault. The plaque was gone. In its place, a larger panel, clean lettering. It listed the names of 48 families who had moved in on opening day. Beneath the names, one line, "For those who were here all along." I stood in front of it for a long time. My mother's name is on that panel. Third row from the top. She moved into Unit 14B on a Tuesday in May. She called me from the window of her new apartment and said, "I can see a courtyard from here." I said I knew. "You were right that some people deserve this building more than others." "You were wrong about which ones. I don't think about Whitley much. That's not me being gracious, it's just that she was never the point. The point was the structure she lived inside, and what happens when someone who was meant to polish the floors decides to own them instead. I think about my mother's note a lot. The one from the bus stop. "You are not a guest in any room you earn the right to enter." I kept it in the pocket of every blazer I've worn since I was 14 years old. It's in my pocket right now. The paper has gone soft with handling. The ink is faint in some places. It still says exactly what it said. Dr. Acaffer told me once that you have to decide to be the whole thing you are. It took me 20 years to understand she wasn't talking about achievement. She was talking about taking up the space. Not more than you need. Exactly as much. 20 years is a long time. But the right structures are worth building slowly. The people who underestimated you, did they do it because of something they saw in you or something they needed to see in themselves? And which answer changes what you do next?